On the morning of June 1st, 1939, Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov stepped off a train in Moscow with the calm expression of a man who believed he was about to disappear. For 2 years, since Stalin's purges had torn the Red Army apart, Zhukov lived with a packed bag by his door. Generals vanished overnight. Commanders confessed to crimes they had never committed. Loyalty meant nothing. Survival depended on luck, timing, and silence. Zhukov had already been accused once. This summons to Moscow felt final. He was wrong, but not in the way he hoped. Zhukov was not born to power. He came from poverty, from a peasant family in Kaluga province. His childhood was marked by hunger and hard labor, not privilege. The army gave him something rare in Tsarist Russia and later the Soviet Union: structure. He learned discipline early, survived the chaos of World War I, and then the Russian Civil War. Unlike many officers, he rose not through politics, but through competence. That alone made him dangerous. By the late 1930s, Stalin had become obsessed with enemies real, and imagined the Red Army's leadership was decapitated. 3 out of 5 marshals were executed. Hundreds of senior officers were shot or sent to the Gulag. The message was clear: no one was safe. Zhukov survived by keeping his head down and doing his job exceptionally well. But excellence attracted attention, and attention under Stalin was lethal. Instead of arrest, Zhukov was given an order: take command of Soviet forces at Khalkhin Gol, a remote border region between Mongolia and Japanese-controlled Manchuria. Officially, it was a border incident. In reality, it was a quiet war. The Japanese Kwantong Army believed Soviet forces were weak, badly led after the purges. They expected an easy victory. Zhukov arrived to find chaos. Poor logistics, exhausted troops, and commanders terrified of making decisions without approval from Moscow. Zhukov did not wait for permission. He understood something many Soviet commanders had forgotten: war rewards speed, deception, and concentration of force. He reorganized supply lines across hundreds of kilometers of empty steppe. Trucks ran day and night over dirt roads. Fuel, ammunition, and artillery were positioned quietly, methodically. Most importantly, Zhukov planned not to defend but to annihilate. In August 1939, he launched a massive double envelopment against the Japanese forces. Tanks, infantry, artillery, and air power moved in perfect coordination, something the Red Army was not supposed to be capable of anymore. Within days, the Japanese were encircled. Their units were destroyed or forced to retreat in humiliation. It was the first decisive Soviet victory against a modern, disciplined army. Tokyo was stunned. Moscow was impressed and afraid. Zhukov had proven something dangerous. The Red Army could still fight. More dangerously, he could command it. Instead of a bullet, Zhukov received promotion. He was called back to Moscow and appointed chief of the General Staff in January 1941. It should have been the peak of his career. Instead, it became a nightmare. By then, reports were flooding in. German troops massing along the western border. Intelligence from spies, diplomats, even Hitler's own leaks pointed to one conclusion: Germany was preparing to invade. Zhukov believed it. So did a handful of others. Stalin did not. Hitler, Stalin insisted, would not open a second front while Britain still resisted. Warnings were dismissed as provocations. Officers who pushed too hard were accused of panic. Zhukov argued anyway. He proposed defensive preparations, troop dispersal readiness measures. Stalin exploded. "You want to provoke Germany?" he shouted during one meeting. "Are you trying to frighten us into war?" Zhukov backed down, but not completely. Quietly, he ordered limited preparations where he could. It wasn't enough. On June 22, 1941, Operation Barbarossa began. The German invasion was catastrophic. Soviet airfields were destroyed on the ground. Entire armies were encircled. Communications collapsed. Panic spread faster than orders. Within weeks, millions of Soviet soldiers were killed or captured. Stalin retreated into silence. Zhukov did not. He was sent from one collapsing front to another, first to the Southwest Front, then to Leningrad, then to Moscow itself. Each assignment was worse than the last. Failures piled up. Not always his fault, but under Stalin, fault was irrelevant. In September 1941, with German forces approaching Moscow, Zhukov was summoned again. This time, no one pretended it was an honor. If Moscow fell, someone would pay. Zhukov knew the rules. Victory meant survival. Failure meant erasure. He took command of the defense of the capital with ruthless clarity. Retreats were organized instead of chaotic. Fresh divisions were rushed from Siberia units. Stalin had previously refused to move, fearing a Japanese attack that would never come. Zhukov gambled everything. He built layered defenses, forced exhausted troops to hold the line, and prepared reserves for a counterattack no one else believed possible. Winter came early. German supply lines stretched thin. Their soldiers were unprepared for the cold. On December 5, 1941, Zhukov ordered the counteroffensive. For the first time, the German army was pushed back. Moscow did not fall. Zhukov had saved the capital and possibly the Soviet Union. But under Stalin's shadow, survival was temporary. Glory was suspicious, and the war was only beginning. Saving Moscow did not make Georgy Zhukov safe. In Stalin's world, success was suspicious. A man who won battles gained prestige, and prestige threatened the cult of one ruler. Zhukov was celebrated publicly, but watched privately. His victories were useful. His popularity was not. The war moved south. By the summer of 1942, Hitler launched his next gamble case. Blew drive in toward the oil fields of the Caucasus, and the city that bore Stalin. Named Stalin for Hitler, the city was symbolic. For Stalin, it was personal. For Zhukov, it was an opportunity and a trap. Stalingrad was chaos. German forces smashed into the city, reducing factories and apartments to rubble. The Volga River, behind the Soviet defenders, became a lifeline and a grave. Soldiers crossed under constant fire. Many drowned before reaching the shore. Casualties were measured in thousands per day. Zhukov saw what others missed. The Germans were bleeding themselves white in the ruins. Together with Alexander Vasilevsky, Zhukov planned Operation Zhironissa, counteroffensive not against the city itself, but against the weaker Axis forces guarding the German flanks. Romanian, Italian, and Hungarian units were stretched thin and poorly equipped. Stalin hesitated. The risk was enormous. If it failed, the Red Army would lose its last strategic reserve. Zhukov did not soften the truth. "This is our chance," he said. "If we wait, we lose everything." In November 1942, the plan went into motion. Soviet armor smashed through the flanks, advancing rapidly across frozen steppe. Within days, the German Sixth Army was encircled inside Stalingrad. Hitler ordered them to stand fast. They starveth. By February 1943, over 300,000 Axis soldiers were dead or captured. It was the greatest defeat in German military history. The myth of invincibility shattered. The world celebrated Stalingrad as the turning point of the war. Stalin accepted the glory. Zhukov returned to work. The next battle was even larger. In the summer of 1943, Hitler assembled the largest armored force ever created, aiming to crush the Red Army in a decisive blow. Zhukov knew the attack was coming. Soviet intelligence was excellent. Biden German plans were almost entirely known. The question was not what Hitler would do, but when. Zhukov proposed something radical. Do not attack first. Let the Germans smash themselves against layered defenses, trenches, anti-tank, guns, then counterattack with fresh reserves. It was a strategy of patience, something Stalin despised. Stalin argued for preemption. Zhukov refused to bend. For once, Stalin listened. At Kursk, the German assault ran straight into hell. Tanks exploded in minefields. Infantry was shredded by artillery. The famous clash at Prokhorovka became a steel graveyard. When the German offensive finally stalled, Zhukov unleashed the counterblows. After Kursk, Germany never regained the strategic initiative. From that point on, the Red Army advanced relentlessly westward. City after city fell: Kharkov, Kiev, Minsk, Warsaw. Zhukov became Stalin's fireman, sent to the most critical fronts, trusted with the hardest tasks. And yet, the closer victory came, the colder Stalin grew. Zhukov was blunt. He argued openly. He criticized unrealistic orders. He did not flatter. Stalin tolerated him because he had too but resentment built quietly. In April 1945, the final act began. Berlin. Stalin made the race personal. Zhukov commanded the First Belarusian Front, while Ivan Konev commanded the First Ukrainian Front. Both were ordered to take Berlin. The competition was deliberate. Stalin wanted rivalry, not loyalty. Zhukov attacked across the Oder River under brutal fire. Casualties were horrific. The Silo Heights became one of the bloodiest Soviet assaults of the war. Critics would later accuse Zhukov of recklessness. Zhukov would answer simply, Berlin was the last fortress of Nazi Germany. There was no bloodless way in. By May 2nd, 1945, Berlin fell. On my ocho, Inkalshorst Zhukov represented the Soviet Union at Germany as a formal surrender. It should have been the pinnacle of his life. It was the beginning of his fall. Soviet soldiers adored him. Western generals respected him. Photographs showed crowds cheering his name. Stalin noticed everything. After the victory parade, Zhukov was quietly removed from power. Accused of Bonapartism and excessive ambition, he was stripped of his influence and sent to obscure military districts. His medals were counted, his conversations monitored. He was not arrested. That alone was a warning. For years, Zhukov lived in semi-exile, watching history reshape itself without him. He had defeated Hitler, but he had never defeated Stalin. Only after Stalin's death in 1953 did Zhukov return. He played a key role in arresting Lavarny Beria, the secret police chief who had terrorized the nation. For a brief moment, Zhukov stood again at the center of power. But the system had not changed enough. In 1957, he was removed once more, this time by Nikita Khrushchev, who feared his independence. The pattern repeated. The state used him, then discarded him. Georgy Zhukov died in 1974. He was buried with honor, but not with honesty. Official history praised victories while softening conflicts. It avoided the truth that Zhukov's greatest enemy was not Hitler, but the political machine he served. He survived purges, invasions, and the most destructive war in human history. Not because he was loyal, but because he was indispensable until he wasn't.